Hi guys, my name's Axel Brown and I am a bobsleigh pilot for Great Britain, which means I drive one of these things for the national team. So I'm coming to you with a bit of a question and answer session on behalf of All Sports Insurance, who have helped us out a huge deal with insuring our custom van to drive it all around Europe, because transporting one of these things to and from the race is not very easy. It's certainly when we're this far away from home. So I've got a few questions to answer, some that I've heard before and some new ones, so let's waste no time, let's get straight into it. So the first question, and I get this a lot, is how did you get into bobsleigh? As you might imagine, it's not a quick answer, but the quickest is largely, I saw it in the Olympics, thought it was cool, wanted to do it, and so I did it. Now it helped that when they were describing the athletes, I was like, hang on, that sounds like me or like I could be. You know, I'm quite tall, I'm 6'5", like 195 centimeters, and have a good speed history. And so, yeah, I kind of thought, you know what, I'll try out for that. I tried out as an under 18, didn't quite make it, played American football in America for a couple of years, came back age 23, I think, and tried out again. And that time I did make the development squad, and then I've been working my way up over the last 5 or 6 years, and now I am in the front seat and having some success there. So that's pretty much the easy answer as to how I got into it. So next up, how did you transition from training to making your first ever bobsleigh run? Truth be told, there's absolutely nothing that can prepare you for your first run in a bobsleigh. I've tried to explain it to people before they've got in for their first one, even with me, and honestly, there's nothing quite like it. With regards to training, we do a lot of speed training, a lot of weightlifting training, because this weighs 170 kilos and is a light one. So we have to move this amount of weight as fast as we can against the clock, which is no mean feat. So you want to be strong, but you've also got to be fast, because once it gets moving, you've got to be able to keep putting in speed to it. If you were really strong, you might be great for like 10 meters, but then when it starts getting away from you, you need that base level of speed as well. So we train so that our bodies are ready to push this and push it at speed. But ultimately, the first time you get in a bobsleigh, all of that will completely go out the window. Completely normal to panic, to worry, to all of those. But that first run, trust me, is pretty terrifying, regardless of what track it is, where you are. You could be on the easiest track in the world and it's going to surprise you, trust me. So what kind of average speeds do you hit in a run? It varies a lot by the track. It also varies whether you're in a 2-man like this one or if you're in a 4-man sled. Generally, when you're racing, most tracks you'll hit around 120 kilometers an hour. However, when you've got places like Whistler, where the Vancouver Games were held, you can get near enough 160 kilometers an hour, which is then around about 100 miles an hour. So you're generally operating within that window. There's not a right lot that's slower than that. You might be slower in a training run or something, but when it comes to racing, you're generally between that 120 and 160 kilometer an hour mark. What's the highest speed I've reached in a bob? So as a driver, I believe it's, and I'll have to check this and I'll put it like right here somewhere, what I've actually done. I believe it's around 130, because I've not been on any of the particularly fast tracks. Now, as a brakeman, which is the phrase for one of the pushers, I've done 155 in Whistler, and that was in a 4-man. Again, Whistler is basically, it's the fastest track in the world, so that's where you'll find all of the speed records. Now, this is an interesting question, because once you've done bobsleigh, it's obvious, but it might not necessarily be. So, once you've started the descent, how do you control the speed of the bob? In short, you don't. Once this gets moving, it's not stopping until the bottom. So we have brakes in the back, but the brakes, you're not touching those until you've crossed the finish line. So this thing will continue to accelerate the entire way down the track, and the tracks are generally between 1 kilometer and 1 mile long. So you're accelerating down the hill for that whole time. The more detailed answer to that is how you drive it. So obviously we're trying to be as fast as possible, but when you're going around some corners are a full 360 degrees, you're trying to control that speed and harness it so that you have the speed at the right points and you're using that speed to help you stick to the corners. The quick answer is you don't control the speed. The track kind of controls your speed for you. And ultimately we try and be as fast as physically possible. So we're doing everything we can to not slow down. Next up, do you have a lot of fitness training as well as training in the bobsleigh? So I mentioned that slightly earlier. Yes, we do. That's with regards to the sport of bobsleigh. I think about 85% of the sport happens before you've even got in the sled. That's from weightlifting to sled preparation. You might be able to see all of the tools and stuff that we carry with us, which again, the van crucial for. So thank you again, All Sports Insurance. And there's a huge amount of training, huge amount of preparation that goes into it. As a driver, I have to mentally prepare for the track. So if you watch a bobsleigh race, or if you were at the start of a bobsleigh track, you see a lot of drivers doing this kind of thing. And that's us visualizing our steers and how the turn is going to take you. So it's important because, like we said, there's no slowing down. So even if you've never been to a track before, and this is the process I was going through this week, in fact, if you've never been to the track before, you need to learn it and be able to picture it in your head before you get on the ice, because if you try and react to what you see, it's too late and you're going to crash. You need to be a step ahead mentally. Then physically, now again, I said it before, we have to be big enough, strong enough, but then also fast enough to move the sled on the start, and that's crucial. So it's quite a lot to take in. You've got to, as a pilot, prepare physically to be able to push this thing as fast as you can, but also mentally, so that once you've done your 6-second push and you've jumped in and you're in the front seat, then you switch your mind, and now you've got to bring your heart rate down, you've got to be focused up and make sure that you're then driving it as smoothly and as fast as you can. So where do you train? Can you do much training at home, or does it involve trips abroad to colder places? So there's two ways of training. There's the physical training that we do, and then there's the actual bobsleigh training. So the physical training, in theory, you can do wherever there's a gym, wherever there's a sprint track. Now we have a push facility in Bath, which is essentially a downhill slope where we can practice the pushing and the loading on a bobsleigh with wheels, basically. Now that's a really valuable training tool because it means that when we come to the ice, it's not like we haven't touched a sled or pushed a sled before. However, when it comes to actually driving and going down the slope, you have to just wait until it's cold. So we only operate in pure bobsleigh from November to March when it's cold enough for there to be a track. There are no Southern Hemisphere tracks, so pretty much it's only a Northern Hemisphere winter when we can actually train for bobsleigh. And we don't get as many reps as you might think. So a season can consist of as few as 100 runs and up to, a few hundred. But over the course of 5 months, you're only looking at doing 2, 3, sometimes 4 runs a day, because it can be so physically taxing and mentally taxing that after that, you're not really benefiting from it. Is there much technology involved in the sleighs? And what is it that sets the best teams above the rest? That's a really interesting question, and I could talk your ear off all day about it. There is a huge amount of technology in these. However, the basics remain the same. In much the same way as if you look at a Formula One car, you can't necessarily tell what one is doing from another that makes it way faster. So if you look at this sled next to a far slower sled, you'd be hard pushed to pick out what makes the difference. But in short, there's a lot of things that make the difference. How rigid the sled is, if it's rattling about, that's all wasted energy. You've got to remember that this sport comes down to the thousandths of a second. So those tiny little margins can make all the difference. So if you've got a bit of give in your sled where you don't want it, that could make the effect. Equally, there's some places where you do want some movement. You've got the aerodynamics of the sled. There are strict rules on how a sled can look. For example, the distance between the front and the back has to remain the same, the height, how concave the roof is, which is why most sleds look the same. But there is then a lot of aerodynamic testing. So you'll notice on this one, we've got kind of a ridge here. That's to split the air over the driver's helmet, because the driver will sit here and it will blow the air past the helmet. If you imagine this is my head, this ridge is then helping split that airflow over the helmet, for example. Then, and this is the bit that I didn't fully understand even before I became a pilot is how integral the runners are. Now, the runners are not the people that are pushing it. The runners are, in fact, the blades that go on the underneath. So I have a full set of them here. So this is a bobsleigh runner. So this attaches to this shoe here. This is a back one, so that'll go on the back there. And this is what makes contact with the ice. So they're not sharp, like an ice skate might be. They're quite smooth. And you can get varying widths, varying profiles of these. Now these make a huge amount of difference. You could go from a slow set, this, to a fast set, like those in there, and that could make upwards of at least half a second's difference, if not more like a second. You could change nothing else, not change the sled, not change the drive, not change the speed. Well, the runners themselves will change the speed by, around about a second based on picking the right pair. So that is absolutely integral, and having a selection, but also good quality ones, is absolutely crucial. It's similar to, if you know cars, going out on a winter tyre versus a slick. And it literally is that level of difference between a thin, sharper runner and a fatter, wider runner. And you want to pick those runners based on the ice, based on the track, based on your driving ability. So yes, there's a huge amount of technology that goes into the sled, and I don't have time to show you all of it, but maybe we can do a whole separate video on what exactly makes a sled go fast. Okay, 2 more. 1, what are my targets for the season? This is an interesting one. Ultimately, it's to get better at driving, to get better as a team, because we're quite a young, new team, and to get just better on the world stage. The results will then follow that. However, that's a bit of a cop-out of an answer. I want to race on the World Cup this year, and I'd like to improve on my placing last year. So last year I was ranked 38th in the world as a pilot. I would like to improve on that and maybe see if I can't get closer to the top 20. It's important to note here that the teams are based on the driver. So I am the driver, and therefore the team is kind of named after me. And if you see anything on the results, it's my name. However, it's of course the full team, my athletes, that help me move around, and all the sponsors and everything. It's all a big part of it. So though it's my name on the score sheet, we are the sum of our parts, from the 3 guys that help push me to all of these sponsors down on the sled, and in this case particularly All Sport Insurance for helping us just even get here. How would someone go about it if they wanted to give it a try? And again, I get asked this quite a lot. So it depends what exactly you want to try. Do you want to try getting in a bobsleigh and see what that's like going down the hill? Or do you want to try and be an elite bobsledder? Because bobsleigh as a sport largely only exists at the elite level. There isn't really amateur bobsleigh. So if you wanted to be an athlete and get involved with the British setup or your local national team, the way to do that would be to find an open tryout, to turn up and perform well at that. Generally, the metrics that you would look for there are speed, between 0 and 30 meters and 0 and 60 meters. They're quite good metrics for bobsleigh, as well as power, so that might be, for example, running under 6.9 seconds for 60 meters, whilst also being able to back squat 200 kilos. That would be a good start for an elite bobsledder, for example. If, however, you just wanted to try bobsleigh and get in one of these things and go down the run, taxi bob rides is what they're called, where tourists can come along, you pay, you jump in the sled, and you have a very experienced driver drive you down the hill. Now, you won't be off the top of the track, and chances are there'd be some kind of roll cage or something to keep you safe, because without it, they can be pretty dangerous. We kind of live that risk, but then again, we do it a lot. So there's kind of 2 ways of going about it and how you would want to get into it. So I hope that's helped shed some light on my team, me as a driver, this sport. If you have any other questions, put them down in the comments and maybe we'll get to them in a different video. But I hope that's been informative and enjoyable. Thank you so much for watching. Bye guys.